Good morning, welcome to Breakfast with Naga Manchetti and Charlie State.
Our headlines today. A snack tax on sugary and salty food is proposed to help improve the nation's health.
So this video is going to be exploring that tax on sugary foods. There's obviously already been a tax, an indirect tax on sugary drinks, but there's been a report to advise the government to expand on that tax and also target sugary foods as well. So what type of tax would it be? It would be considered a sin tax, which is an excise duty specifically levied on certain goods deemed harmful to society. So we've already seen them on sugary drinks, we've seen them on tobacco, we've seen them on alcohol, but this is going to be introduced on foods. So to give you some examples, we've got this tax would be targeting chocolate bars, cakes, biscuits, cereals, crisps, and so on. So if we're going to look at the reasons as to why it's being recommended, we can see just from these three products alone how much sugar is in. So for example, 45-gram bar of milk chocolate, we've got 6 teaspoons, a 415-gram a tin of baked beans, 5 teaspoons, and a 50-gram serving of a cereal, such as nut flake cereal, has 4 teaspoons. Now, what they are also recommending is that just taxing these alone isn't enough to solve the market failure, but what actually they're recommending is to hypothecate the tax and to use the tax revenue to also fund prescribing healthy foods and also a trial of community eat well programs, which would be the GPs prescribing fruit and vegetable to people with poor diets and low incomes. So I'm just going to show you a video of a little bit more information on this.
We argue there's a junk food cycle, an interaction between the commercial incentives of companies who market more and more of this stuff to us and our appetites which fail and we get sick. And we think you need to attack that feedback loop, that commercial dysfunction directly with a tax.
He recommends taxing the sugar and salt sold to food producers, letting GPs prescribe fruit and vegetables for those on a poor diet, and expanding the free school meals programme to more children.
Today's report says a poor diet contributes to 64,000 deaths every year in England alone and costs the economy an estimated £74 billion. There's an environmental impact too. Global food production is the second biggest contributor to climate change. The report recommends a tax on sugary and salty foods. If producers don't change their recipes to use less, it could mean a price increase of 15 to 25% for desserts, biscuits and sweets. The report also calls for food education.
So as the video highlights, there's a £74 billion cost to the economy because of sugary foods and the illnesses related to it. Obviously, most of that will be on the NHS in terms of trying to treat those illnesses. But that really, I suppose, tells you why there's negative externalities, because of the marginal social cost and how society benefits less than those producers who are obviously producing those types of foods. So when we're looking at it from the point of view of negative externalities and the diagram, we can see that if left to a free market, we'd have the market equilibrium of Q1 and P1. The reason being is because in terms of the marginal private benefits, if we're thinking and focusing mostly on the producer who generate all the revenues from selling those types of unhealthy foods, which we do know, demerit goods that are overconsumed, they are obviously going to be incentivized to continue to sell them at that Q1, which would be the free market point. But the government is obviously aware of the dangers to society, but also the dangers to the consumers involved in that private transaction, and therefore they might not be willing to leave it to the free market, and they obviously want to intervene. If they intervene, one of the methods, as we've mentioned in the video, is via an indirect tax, or that sin tax. Now, the whole policy is aimed and designed to try and get it to the socially optimum point of Q2. To do that, obviously, that indirect tax is going to be billed to the producers of the firm. Now, the producers obviously experience a cost, an increase in cost, but also the consumers, as part of that private transaction, will probably have to pay some of that because it'll be passed on by the producers to the consumer, and therefore consumers experience a higher cost. Now, in doing so, that marginal social cost equals marginal private costs will be higher, and therefore we see it at that. So the marginal social cost equals marginal private cost with tax, and we see that additional price of P3 because of the costs involved with regards to the implementation and the introduction and the experience of that indirect tax, that sin tax. But in doing so, it brings it to that Q2 with a new market equilibrium of marginal private benefit equals the marginal social cost equals the marginal private cost with the tax, and therefore at Q2.